Hi, it's Matt from Tubby Tarot. Welcome to a special edition of Book Chat. Today I'm going to be looking at all my horror books. Now, I do, however, notice that every time I go onto YouTube and I type in horror book collections, everybody has a Stephen King collection. Now, I want to get this out of the way first. I don't like Stephen King. Be that as it may, I do have a couple of Stephen King books, and I'm going to show you those first. And I'll quickly explain to you why these are the actual only bits and pieces that I've got. Okay, so bearing in mind I'm not a Stephen King fan, but these are the books that I have read and reread and will reread. Okay, I only have 6 Stephen King books, and I'll quickly show you these books. Okay, so the first one I've got is one called Salem's Lot. All right, so, and yes, these are all pretty much new editions that I've bought online. So Salem's Lot, excellent book, loved this, all right, will definitely reread. I then have a very, very old copy of The Stand. It's the uncut version. Apparently it's got like 800 extra pages or something. So The Stand, fantastic book. If you want any, this is, to me, this is the second greatest book next to Lord of the Rings, okay, the Stand. I then have a fantastic book, as we all know this one. It is It, okay, It by Stephen King. Great book. Fantastic version of it. It has like a huge big sort of introduction by Stephen King and blah, blah, blah. I haven't read this particular version because I only got it a couple of days ago, but I have read this book twice in other versions. So this is the one I got. I then have my favorite all-time Stephen King book, and that is Pet Sematary. Okay, Pet Sematary is my all-time most chilling Stephen King book. Some people say Misery is the one, but this to me is the one. It's also one of the most frightening movies I've ever seen. I think it's the very first movie that was made. Terrifying film, fantastic book. And then, of course, I have The Shining, this little version of The Shining. People are quite surprised when they see The Shining. It's not you'd expect it to be this huge book, but it's not. It's actually quite a slim little book. And then I went and bought Dr. Sleep. Now, I have not read Dr. Sleep, but the only reason I bought it is because it's the kind of compendium. It's the sequel to The Shining. Okay, I haven't read it. I have not seen the film. So I'm quite looking forward to seeing what it's all about. Okay, and guys, that's my Stephen King collection. That's it. That's all I've got. So anybody who wants to argue with me about Stephen King, please do. I find Stephen King extremely bloated. I'm not a huge fan because I find that he can take 7 pages to describe someone's knitted sweater. So yeah, that's my Stephen King collection. Now, a couple of the people I'm going to show you, you'll know one or two of the people. And if you're really into horror, you might know some of the authors that I'm going to speak about, some of the less known authors. So let's go with an author that not everybody knows about, okay? And this guy's called Ramsay Campbell, all right? And Ramsay Campbell, I'm busy putting my Ramsay Campbell collection together. I only have secondhand copies, which is fantastic. I love rooting around in the secondhand stores. Now, Ramsay Campbell is just such a fantastic horror writer. If you can get your hands on some of his books, please do. He's absolutely excellent. Okay, so here I've got a book called The Count of 11. Okay, and it's pretty good. Okay, it's really good. Now it's all about ill luck and a place that burns down, and this guy's got this whole list. So anyway, it's a fantastic book. It's very much a cross between a horror story and a mystery story. And that's what I like about Ramsay Campbell, is all his books they've got that horror, that true horror element, but they have almost like a sort of mystery, police procedural thing going on, but there's a lot of horror as well, like ghosts and that sort of things. So that's one of them somebody to look out for, Ramsay Campbell. Ancient Images, one of his very first books. Fantastic book, all right, about a haunted film. Okay, we have The Influence. I haven't read this one. There's the cover, lovely cover. I love that cover. It's pretty cool. I think this is one of his later works, if I'm not mistaken, but really looking forward to reading that one. Then we have Cold Print. This is a book of short stories by Ramsay Campbell. I think he wrote 4. short story books, and this is one of them. Don't you just freaking love that cover? It's absolutely awesome. And then we have The Claw. Again, I haven't read this one. Actually not that fantastic book. I think it's also one of his later works, like newer works. Oh my God, my Peter James are all falling down. Not bad. Okay, I'm looking forward to reading this one. And then my last Ramsay Campbell book that I've got at the moment, I have some on order that are going to be arriving in maybe 2 weeks' time. The last one, love this cover. It's called The Nameless. Okay, Ramsay Campbell is a British author. So along with a couple of British authors like James Herbert, Ramsay Campbell is a British author. So try and get your hands on some Ramsay Campbell books. They are really, really good. It's nice to have that. It's nice to have something different than boring old Stephen King. I know I'm going to keep doing this. Poor Stephen, he's going to get a fucking, in South Africa we call it a poesklap, big hard smack every time I mention his name. Okay, then I want to move on. Now I want to move on to somebody I know that all of you have heard of. All right, if you haven't heard of this author, you really do need to go out and get his stuff. And his name is Peter James. And Peter James has written mainly sort of crime novels. Okay, he has like his detective, like Agatha Christie has Poirot. Peter James has, I'm not sure, I haven't read any of the crime stories, but he has his detective that goes around and finds all his crime things out. But he has written 7 horror stories, okay? And the one lot is actually a sequel. There's one and then there's the sequel, okay? There is The House on a Cold Hill, which is such a good book. It's just about this haunted house and weird shit that goes on with the people in the house, okay? It's slightly different. It's a different kind of take on the haunted house genre. And then he wrote a sequel called The Secret of Cold Hill, which is, it follows on 4 years after this book, and it's great, okay? And these are really nice covers. It's the reprint of these books. Very nice covers. I love it, and I kind of like a book that's kind of really reasonably big. I mean, look at this compared to this. Okay, I like these bigger books. Also found the bigger books have got bigger writing in them, so I kind of dig that. Okay, so there's those two, and then he wrote a whole lot of other stuff. He wrote Possession, a bit of a boring cover, but I get it. Once you read the story, you'll understand the strange cover. Okay, it's basically about it's not about demonic possession. It's about something else. Okay, think about the word possession, you kind of understand. I'm not going to give any. There's no spoilers here, guys, so it's fun. Then he wrote, and I really like this. This cover, it's called Dreamcatcher, and no, it's got nothing to do with the other I think it's Dean Koontz that wrote Dreamcatcher, or was it Stephen King? I'm not sure, but anyway, it's got nothing to do with that book, okay? This is completely different, all right? It's about a guy who starts having nightmares, and his nightmares actually basically start turning real, and it's like, why? What is it that is kind of possessing him? So it's another very, very cool Peter James book. Then I bought 3 brand new off the internet because they were on special. And if you bought 2, you got 1 free. So I've got this one called Twilight. Love me that cover. Okay, I haven't read this yet, but I love that cover. And it's about someone who's murdered, and they have to have an exhumation order done. So they dig the body up, and then they find out that the person wasn't actually murdered. There's some other dark shit going down. Okay, so it's very cool. Then also Peter James, Prophecy. Again, I love that cover. Okay, this is about I can't remember this one. I read this. This is a new version of it that I got. This is about murders that happen. A young boy sees his mom being murdered, and many years later, the murders start again, and he has to kind of like figure out what's going on. Is it supernatural? Is it real? That kind of thing. As I said to you, he does tend to have a bit of a, because he's mainly a crime writer, he tends to also, like Ramsay Campbell, put a bit of sort of whodunit in there, okay? And then the last one I've got of his, which I read many years ago, well, a long time ago, and it's really, really good. It's called Perfect People, and you can, by the cover, you can imagine what it's about. It's about a geneticist, a doctor who's kind of helping women fall pregnant, and you can just imagine where it leads on from there. And those are the Peter James books. Those are the only Peter James books that he actually wrote as horror books. These are not part of his crime novels. These are the only sort of 7 books that he wrote that are like horror. Okay, let's move on to someone else you might not have heard of, okay, but I'm sure if you're into horror novels, if you're into anything horror, you'll have heard of Sean Hudson. He's been around for many, many, many years, okay, and he's written some really cool stuff, all right. I'm busy collecting all his stuff at the moment, so I don't have a large amount. He has written many, many books. I think he's written over 60 books, okay, that I want to collect. Some of them are not 100% horror, but all his horror books I'm busy collecting. So you'll see that most of these are new because I'm ordering them online. They're very different. They're very difficult to find secondhand because he's been writing since the 1970s. Okay, so let's have a look at what I've got. To start off with, this was his very, very first book that he ever wrote that made him very famous. It was called Slugs. I love that cover. Look, it's kind of oozing into the mouth. Love it. It's kind of like James Herbert's Rats, but this one's called Slugs. It's about giant man-eating slugs. Okay, and then he had a follow-up to Slugs with Breeding Ground, another fantastic, a fantastic cover. If you have a look at them, I'll show you. They're kind of like, they're like the same. You can see it's the same artist. Fantastic, fantastic books. They are creepy as hell, and they are like splatter, splatter, splatter gore, freaking splatter horror like you can't believe. Splatter horror is where a book has got like a lot of gore and flesh-eating monsters and shit like that. So yeah. Then he wrote, and this is a really interesting, these are really interesting. This is about a guy, they're 2 books, it's a series, okay? So this is the first one, it's called Hybrid. I'm so sorry, this is the first one. No, is this the first one? No, this one's first. No, this one's first. Okay, this one is this one's the first one, and it's about he's a writer. This guy's a writer, and he starts seeing things, and he thinks he's going mad because basically kind of stuff that's happening in his books start coming true, and the murders and blah blah blah. And it's called Herbert, and I really like that cover. It's a reissue, obviously. It's a new cover. It's not the original cover from when he originally wrote the book, but my one is secondhand, and it's in really, really good condition. Okay, and then there's a follow-up called Heathen, and this has got a completely, this is what the original covers looked like. Okay, can you see that? And then this is what the like reprint covers look like. So these are like really schlocky, and I love this. I love this. Whereas I found this a little bit, I love the cover, but it's a bit tame. Anyway, this is the follow-on where, well, I can't tell you much about this book in case you haven't read this book. But this is kind of the follow-on from what happens at the end of this book. And they're pretty good. It's not the very best. It's not like this, because this to me is just such great, kitschy, cheesy kind of pulp fiction-y writing. This is, he's got a lot more, he's matured as a writer when he ended up with these, okay. Now, he wrote a lot more stuff, obviously a lot more stuff. And the ones I've got is, and I love the covers to these, they're really cool. Again, these are very new prints. Last Rites, it's just, you got to be careful of what you basically wish for. It's about kind of gang warfare in London, and this gang gets hold of this guy, and all kinds of shit happens from there. And I think he comes back from the dead, if I remember correctly, and it's basically a ghostly revenge tale. Then I have Lucy's Child. Okay, this is a very strange book. It's kind of like it's about a woman who falls pregnant, and then some other woman gets hold of her, and then it's like baby swapping and all kinds of shit. But it's, of course, it's is the baby Lucifer? Is the baby the devil's child? Well, you know, that kind of book. It's quite a thick book for that kind of story. But this is one of those page turners. The nice thing about Sean Hudson is they are quick reads. They throw you right into the deep end. You're in the horror. You read it quickly. I mean, this is such a short little book, and it's huge writing. And it's a really good book. It's called Relics. It's about evil that's been let loose, monsters coming along, and he throws you right into the thick of things. Okay, unlike certain authors that take 22 pages just to introduce the first family car. Okay, I know I'm pissing everyone off. Okay, so very quick, very easy read. Sean Hudson, page turners. He's written another one called Death Day. I really like this new cover. It's very cool. Okay, this is about like this golden disc thing that's found. It's like a chain, and everybody who finds it, everybody who wears it, or everybody who gets it ends up like basically fucked, because the satanic blah blah and demon blah blah comes out and blah blahs them. Okay, another shorty read. Big, fantastic. Great Sean Hudson book. This is the one I got second hand, okay, and they've done something to this book in the second-hand store that absolutely fucking, it just gives me the running craps. Look what they did to this fucking thing. Who does that? Like, who does that? I've done a whole video on this. Who does that to books? And I cannot get it off. And yes, I know you guys say get goo gone and all that kind of stuff. In South Africa, we don't have that kind of stuff. So I'm relying on a slight paraffin rub, and somebody says put olive oil on it. It doesn't work. Okay, so I'm really pissed off about that. But the book is freaking awesome. Okay, it's about these murders that are happening. They happen, and then many years later, they start happening again. Okay, but the guy who did them was like electrocuted or something, and then they think it's a copycat. Anyway, blah, blah. It's really, really good. It's called Captives. Okay, and then I have one called Nemesis by Sean Hudson. Again, reprint, fantastic cover. This is about the murder of this couple's young daughter, and they move to a little town called Hinksville, I think it is, Hingston, and they think that this is where they're going to just chill and relax and get over the trauma of their child's death. But of course, Hingston is not quite what it seems. Okay, another short read. I just love these books. Sean Hudson, Assassin. Again, look at the cover. Okay, this as well, this is very interesting. This is about gang warfare in London. I'm assuming you've realized that this is another British author. Gang warfare in London. The kind of gangs are all out, the mafia is out, and so this one, it's all set in that, and the hero of the story is actually a bad guy. He's a mafia boss, and you're not supposed to like the character. And what he does is, because he's getting basically shot to shit, what his gang is, he calls in a special force called the Assassin to take care of things. Of course, things don't quite go the way he was hoping they would, but this is a book I've read about 3 times. Eventually, I ended up, my copy was stolen, I think, or I left it somewhere, whatever. So I had to get this as well, this new one. And then the last one I've got, again, I have a lot of Sean Hudson on the way. Very short, very, very famous book of his. It's called Spawn. And I love the tagline, from the grave to the cradle. Okay. This is kind of like, there was a movie just recently, and this is kind of like this guy who works in the morgue, and he kind of finds an aborted fetus, and kind of doesn't allow this fetus isn't quite dead, and so you can imagine what happens in this book. It's super, super gory and super cool, and you could probably read this in like 2 days. Okay, so that is Sean Hudson. Okay, fantastic author. I know you guys, if you do get a chance to get his books, if you see one of his books on the shelf, you just have to get it. He is so freaking good. Right, welcome back to part 2 of this special edition of Book Chat. I'm Matthew, and we are going to carry on with one of my favorite non-Stephen King authors. This, I would say, this person is probably like the poor man's Stephen King. Oh, I hate saying that, but it's true. This is the poor man's Stephen King, even though I really, really like his books. And that is a guy called Dean Koontz. Now, before I go on, I just want to explain to you guys what I'm doing with my books. And this is across the board, okay? All the books that I've just shown you and everything, and Dean Koontz in it. But especially with someone like Dean Koontz, where he has written so many books, I find that Dean Koontz he's like Stephen King, every year he churns out a new novel. And I must be honest, the quality of a lot of his new stuff is crap, just like Stephen King. Okay, absolute shit. Well, you've got to really take a chance with them. Maybe 1 out of 10 new books is relatively worth reading. So what I've done with my Dean Koontz collection is I'm only collecting books up to the end of the 1980s, so up to the end of 1989. Okay, and that is just because those are also the books that I know, and they're also the books that, in my opinion, they are the best ones. They're the better ones of when these authors start out writing, they have a specific style, and as they grow older and as they write more and more books, their style changes. And I like the style of authors from the 80s. It's a lot more pulp fiction until they get clever and they get famous and they get very rich, and then they do tend to churn out these books every year. So I'm going to show you these. They are generally in order of publication. I try to keep my books in order of publication unless it is a double book like a series, a sequel or a series or whatever. So let's have a look at what I've got. Now, the other day, I was at my secondhand bookstore. In fact, it wasn't a secondhand bookstore. It was at the SPCA, RSPCA, Animal Welfare. And I was looking at their 5 Rand books. Now, guys, if you had to translate it into American dollars, I would say that, well, times it by 14. So times 5 divided by 14, divide 5 by 14, my American friends. And you'll see that I actually paid a few cents for this book. In South Africa, 5 Rand is nothing. You can't buy a loaf of bread with 5 Rand. You can buy you can't even buy a loose cigarette for 5 Rand. And I looked, and it's not in pristine condition. But for 5 Rand, I found this. How freaking amazing. Look, it's 3 books in one. Okay, yes, it's a little tatty. The cover is, a bit broken and everything. But I can handle that, man. There's no pages missing. It's very readable. And it's 3 books in one. It's Lightning, Midnight, and The Bad Place. And these are 3 very, very famous Dean Koontz books. They are books they're well known, okay? And they're kind of like, they say these 3 of his best books, especially The Bad Place. Everybody loves that. So I picked this up for literally nothing at the RSPCA, SPCA, Animal Welfare. So I was super, super stoked about that. So I've got that, which is 3 books. I don't know where to put all these books. Then I've got Whispers. Now these are kind of in order, okay, from now on. I've got Whispers. Not a fan of this cover. Doesn't really mean anything to me, okay? It's about voices, as you can imagine, in this little town, and it starts getting more and more sort of freaky, and weird shit starts happening. So Dean Koontz, Whispers. I love this. Dean Koontz loved dogs, so I'm gonna. So does James Herbert, by the way. But that is a picture of a very old picture of Dean Koontz and his golden retriever. Okay, stunning picture. I love it. Okay, so there's that. That's Whispers. Then I've got a book that not many people know about because he actually wrote this under a different name. And I can't. Oh, here we go. He wrote this under the pseudonym of Owen West. He's written a lot of books under pseudonyms, by the way. He wrote it as Owen West, and it's a very small book, very short. It's almost a novella, and it's called The Fun House. Guys, if you can get your hands on this book, even if you get the Owen West version, because they're almost exactly the same. This is just slightly extended when he came out as Dean Koontz. This book is, excuse the pun, such fun. It's a rollicking ride. And of course, it's all about this fair, and it's about the fun house and all the creepy stuff that goes on in the fun house. So it's a really, really good book. It's very short. You could probably read this in a weekend. It's a really great book. So you either get the Dean Koontz version, or in his other name is Owen West. Okay, so there's that. Then I've got The Eyes of Darkness, which it's an okay book. It is a very interesting book because it's about the outbreak of a virus, and the virus becomes a pandemic. Another quite short book with big text. And this is the new print, and it says here, did this thriller predict the coronavirus outbreak? See there. It's a really, really good book. It's all about, as I say, this virus that breaks out and these people that have to go on this journey. Really good book, really worth getting. Now, the other ones that I've got, the next few, are second-hand ones I got, and then they're kind of beat up, but I don't mind. You know, when I get books, I don't mind if they're beat up. In fact, it adds kind of like to the mystery of the book. I always think to myself, where's this book been? Has this book been around the world? Has somebody taken this book around the world? Does this book come from England or Russia? Or, you know, these beaten up little paperbacks that you get in the second-hand store, they have a history. Whereas if you buy like a brand new book, oh, it's so cool. They smell amazing, and it's wonderful to crack that spine. Okay, excuse me, but I tend to crack spines. And it's lovely to have your own brand new book, but there's no mystery in that. And when I buy a second-hand book, especially if it's like a really beaten up one, I just think to myself, like, where have you been, little book? You know? And it gives me enormous pleasure to kind of like imagine where this book has been. And now it's in my possession, and I get to look after it, perhaps only for a while, or perhaps until I die, you know. Okay, so the next book I've got is The Mask, another oldie. All right. It's kind of about deception and people pretending who they're not. Hauntings start. This woman nearly runs over a young girl, and then the girl disappears, and they all want to know who she is, and all kinds of shenanigans go down. So this is it's one of his very early works. It's worthwhile getting. You'll notice that a lot of these early ones have got this kind of, you see the actual writing, it's got like, it looks like it's sploshed. Okay, a lot of his early works are like that. This was his signature title. And look at that cool cover. Again, we're stepping back into the sort of like 80s, early 90s. In fact, not even 90s. I think this was originally 1981. Okay, so we're going right back into the early 80s, and this is the kind of covers they used to do. Superb stuff. This one I've just shown you is The House of Thunder. I haven't read this. And then it says here, the author of Dragon Tears. It's another one I haven't read. I haven't read this, and I've always seen it, and I've never really picked it up, you know. But again, it's got a really cool 80s cover, so I'm not really sure. Blah, 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 House of Thunder, for 4 years of the bar, did she die? Did she come back to life? Anyway, I will be reading this one soon. It's on my TBR. I then have, again, a new book that I ordered. It's called Phantoms. Again, fantastic book. It's very famous. It's one of his more famous books. It's the same cover picture of him and his golden retriever. It's about a town that is basically haunted by phantoms. It was made into a TV movie, which is just absolutely horrible, but it's worth watching just because it's so bad it's good. Really cool book. Get it. It's one of his early ones. Definitely worth reading. Okay, then I have another really beaten up one. It's called Darkness Comes, and you can see it's again one of those really cool pictures. Okay, this is basically about, are you afraid of the dark, or are you afraid of what's in the dark? Okay, I don't want to tell you too much about this because again it'll give it away. Okay, it involves the mafia and that sort of thing, but it's got a very hardcore horror element to it. So it's really nice. It's called Darkness Comes. Not one of his most famous books, but worth getting. Of course, then we have got Twilight Eyes, which is just, you see how tatty this is. It's like really, really beat up novel. I love this, man. I love it. And you'll see that a lot of these, I think they're all from Headline Press. They're from Headline Press. They all have the similar, look at the picture. Okay, so it's very similar. And these are all from Headline Press. This is really, Twilight Eyes, really, really cool. Basically, friend to the poly, blah, blah, feeding on human suffering. There's the stuff, these, I don't know what you call them, demons or ghosts or entities that try to make people like, well, they do. They end up terrifying people, and they end up feeding off that negative energy, that fear. Okay, very good book. Read it. It's a bit long, but it's really cool. Then we have The Door to December. Again, Headline Press. That copy. I think somebody must have basically got rid of all the Headline Press versions of the D.N.R. Koontz books. Okay, this is about a chick whose husband disappears off the face of the earth, and she finds this little boy wandering around, and basically, is this little boy her reincarnation of her husband, or is it something like weirder and darker going on? Okay, so Door to December. It's okay. Another one that's not hugely known. It's an okay book. It's not one of his best. Okay, And then we have this, and this is so weird. This is kind of, I think this is Dean Koontz trying to follow Stephen King's way of writing, because this is a monstrous book, and I think this is the biggest book that he's written, and it's called Strangers. Look at this thing. Just look at it, you know. They are obsessed with the moon. They're all these people that are having the same nightmares. They are all obsessed with the moon. They are fighting for their sanity and their lives, and it's a whole lot of small, like it's a whole lot of stories about people, and it all comes together, like who these people are, why they're coming, how they get together, and so it's a huge book, and it has the teeniest little writing. So it is a monster. I read it many, many, many years ago, and I remember it vaguely, and I'm just really scared to start it because it's so massive. I tend to immerse myself in these huge books, and I tend to take a very long time to read massive books like this, like It and this kind of thing, you know. Okay, but it's definitely worth a read. It's very cool, and it's got a cool. If you look carefully, I'll move it around. Can you see that? Like if I move it around a bit, can you see that? This glows. It kind of changes. Like it's like oily. Really, really cool. Then the last one I've got here is a book, probably one of his most. This is probably his most famous book, and it's called Watchers. Okay, Watchers, not Watches, Watchers. And it's about, oh look, there's a lovely picture of him with his golden retriever again. This book is about a dog. It's not a real dog, it's a superpower dog. And it's about this young boy who finds the dog, and he wants to protect the dog. But the CIA, or whoever it is, this multinational corporation that made this super aware dog, is also after the dog. So it's not a ghost story, it's not a horror story, but it is a wonderful, wonderful story about a dog and his boy. This is one of those things. It's just one of those. It's one of those books that you just have to read, because although there's not a lot of horror, there's also another thing that these people created. It's like a hybrid creature, and that's also kind of like on their tail. So there is that kind of monster effect, but it's really just a lovely book about bonding between like a super intelligent animal and this young boy. It's just a really beautiful book. Okay, so there's that. Now, you might say to yourself, okay, but Matt, Dean Koontz also wrote this really cool, I think there's 7 or maybe 8 books, and I think there's 7 in this amazing collection of books called Odd Thomas. Now, I was very scared to get Odd Thomas. I certainly don't want all the books, because apparently they're not that fantastic. They cannot live up to the first book. And I saw this movie. It came out a couple of years ago, I think in 2019. They did this movie about it. And I watched the movie and I was like, okay, if that's like what Odd Thomas is about, I certainly do not want the book. Anyway, I've been online quite a bit, and I've been doing a lot of research about books and Dean Koontz and that. And I actually thought, you know what, I'm actually going to get the first one. But I'm not going to buy it. If it pops up in a secondhand store, I will take it. So I was rooting through my secondhand bookshop the other day, and look what popped up. They had 2 versions. They had this one, which is small, for 35 rand, which is very cheap. And then they had the big one, the like big book, you know, the big book like this, the big book like this. And that was 65 rand, which was basically double this price. And I was like, no, come on now, guys, it's a secondhand book. And it was quite tatty. This is in really good condition, okay? And you know what, I haven't read it yet, but it just sounds really cool. So I know what the story's about. This dude, the dude who can see like shadow people, and they can't talk to him, and he knows when people are going to die and blah, blah, blah. So I know the whole story, and it sounds really cool. And the movie was blah, but apparently the book is really, really awesome. So this is basically the only modern, more recently published Dean Koontz book that I have. It was published in 2004. Yeah, 2004. So this is the only like modern one, and I think it's fitting because it's kind of a standalone novel with a whole lot of really shit sequels. So I'm looking forward to actually reading the book. And that is my Dean Koontz collection, guys. They are, as I say, I prefer the books. Well, I hope this doesn't fall. I prefer the books from like up to 1989. I find those books in all of my collection, or all of my authors. I find those are like the best horror books. Now, my horror collection would not be complete without talking about James Herbert. Now, James Herbert died a few years ago, so his output of books is complete. So if you want James Herbert, you can buy, if you buy all his standalone novels, you will have a complete set. And I am only waiting for one. My fiance's sister has ordered it off Amazon for me in America because I couldn't get it in South Africa at all. And she has shipped it to me, so it'll arrive in about a month's time. Cassie, if you ever watch this channel, oh, my girl, from James Herbert and myself, I just say thank you. Mwah, thank you so much. You've literally completed my James Herbert standalone novels. Now, James Herbert is most famous for a collection of stories that he, two collections of stories that he did, 3 books each. And you must have heard about this book. And again, why they would do that to a book, I don't know, but it's a book called The Rats. Okay, this is a really quick read. You can read this in, I think, an afternoon, and you will not want to put this down. Okay, the only person I want to have put down is the person who stuck that on there. Fucker. Okay, so there's The Rats. Then the second part of The Rats is called Lair. Okay, and this is where the rats actually escape from this is set in London. This is set in the countryside, same rats, same shit. Basically, now there's more rats, okay, and they're now in the country. And then this one is called Domain. And I like this one best. I love the first one because it's basically just splatter, trashy splatter stuff. But this one's really cool. This one is set a few years after this, and this is set in a post-apocalyptic London, okay, after the bombs have dropped. And they explain a bit about why that happened. But this one focuses a lot on the people that are the characters. There's a lot of character growth. There's a lot of character growth in this book, character development. And I really like that. He's focused more on the people than what he has on the actual rats. But the rats are still in here and they're still doing devastating things to the people. But it also focuses on it's not just the rats that are a problem here. It's actually the people themselves, because it's post-apocalyptic. Everyone wants to basically rule the world as it is. So that's the third one in the series. Really, really cool series. Really, guys, I can recommend that highly recommend that. It's so good. The third series that he did, or second, I keep saying third, because there's 3 books in each series. I'm so sorry. The second series that he did is called the Ash series. And David Ash is his main character, and his main character in these 3 books is David Ash is a what do you call them, like a psychic investigator, okay? He works for the Paranormal Institute and he goes around, but he tries to prove that mediums and everything are a load of shit, and he goes around, and of course there are 3 books tracking David Ash's life. Okay, so his first book is called, the first book in the trilogy is called Haunted. It's about where David Ash he's sent to this old bleak house, and he has to figure out what is going on there. Are there ghosts? Are there not ghosts? If there is a ghost, who is the ghost? Are they, that sort of thing. Really, really good. The second one is set a few years afterwards, and it's called The Ghosts of Sleep. And this is about a small town called Sleeth in Chiltern Hills. I don't know if it's a real place. If you live in the UK, let me know if the Chiltern Hills are actually there. Okay, and this is about a whole town that is haunted. Okay, so he gets sent there to find out why it's haunted. And the interesting thing about this whole trilogy is there's stuff from all 3 books that intertwine. You can read them separately, but these 2 especially, you should read them as a double up whammy. Okay, because there's a lot from here that explains a lot in here. So this is really good, Ghosts of Sleep. I actually just finished it, and I'm busy reading this. Okay, so have a look at this. Haunted started out like that. Then Ghosts of Sleep kind of started out like that. This is the third and last book, and it is like that. It is huge, but the writing is like a child's book. It's so enormous. Okay, look how big that writing is. So that's why the book is so imposing. And this is a really cool one. It's called Ash, and this was the very last James Herbert book to be published before his death. But in the series, it's like a few years after Ghosts of Sleep. And this here is a very, very interesting. It's about this castle. And he's going to go there because there are ghosts in the castle, but there's all kinds of like really interesting things that are happening in the castle over and above the ghosts. Some of this book is actually based on like very, very stretched facts. The characters, there's some characters in this book that are actually real, that were real people. So it's just a really great read. So if you get to do this, this trilogy, like the Rats trilogy, go for it. Love it. Okay. Okay, let me go through the rest of quickly go through the rest of my James Herbert books. He wrote a book called The Fog. Now, these are my best. These are it's a series of books like that, okay. They're a series of books from Pan, okay. These are re-releases, and you can see they all like kind of line up, okay. They've all got the same kind of spine. It's either orange or it's this gray. And I'll show you what's so cool is the covers. So this is a book called The Fog. Now this has got nothing, let's see the cover. This has got nothing to do with John Carpenter's The Fog, the movie The Fog. This is about a crack that opens in the world, in the ground, somewhere in England, and all this like mist, this fog comes out, and it turns people into crazies. Okay, so this is just a really, really good book. But if you're expecting James, what's his name? John Carpenter. I'm so sorry. If you expect this to be like John Carpenter's The Fog, it's not. It's completely different. Then you have The Survivor. Look at the cover. Love these covers. This is about a guy who is the only survivor of a plane crash, and the dead come back to try and help him figure out what actually happened. Okay. You then have Fluke. Fantastic book. This is not a horror book. Look there, look at that cover. Oh my God, it's so cool. This is about a man who is reincarnated as a dog, but he has kept all his all his human faculties. So he's a human trapped in a dog's body, basically. And it is a beautiful book. It's not a horror book. It's very short. It is just beautiful. Okay. It's about this dog the dog doesn't understand what's kind of happening, and the man doesn't understand what's happening because he's a dog and the dog is a man. And eventually it all comes together at the end. It is so beautiful. So if there's one non-horror James Herbert book that you read, it's Fluke. And you can get through this in a weekend. It's really, really easy. You then have The Spear. I haven't read this. But again, look at that amazing cover. It says here, a young Mossad agent is found dead and a private detective is asked to investigate. It's about neo-Nazi cults. They're going to release demonic power and everything. So I'm looking forward to reading this. I haven't read this. I'd never even heard of this one. I didn't know James Herbert wrote something like this. Okay, but it sounds really cool. Then I have The Dark, which is another very cool one. It's a second-hand one, okay. This I read a while ago. It's about basically weird things that hang around in the tunnels, and you need to, if you step out of the light, you're going to get charred. Okay, so basically that's that. Then I have a couple of new ones. I got Shrine. This is awesome. It was released a couple of years ago in the 90s as something or other. I can't remember. And it's just been released 2021 as a movie called Communion. I think it's Communion. Yeah, it was Communion. I think it was that. And it's about this young girl who, she's a pastor's daughter, and she starts seeing visions of the Virgin Mary, and she prays to the Virgin Mary, and she's able to actually do, she can work miracles. She can sort of help the paraplegics walk, and she can take away skin disease and cure cancer and that sort of thing. Really, really interesting book, because of course you can imagine it's not the Virgin Mary. Okay, so that's really good. Here's The Magic Cottage. I know nothing about this book. I haven't read it. I didn't know that he'd written this book. There's another one later on. It's basically about a haunted cottage. Okay, this family move into this cottage. Love me this cover. Ding dong, little doorknob thing. Love the cover. Really looking forward to reading this. Haven't read it. It's on my TBR. But it's all about black magic and witchcraft and stuff. So it's pretty cool. Then I have Sepulchre, which is a very old one. Can you see it's old? A lot of my old books are actually in really good condition. They're not like missing pages and stuff. Okay, and this is pretty good. You see, it's got. I want to show you. It's got like a little fake cover thing inside there. Okay, and it's again, it's about psychics and corruption that's happening in this house, and is it deep demonic forces? James Herbert writes a lot about more demonology and that sort of thing than actual chojos and nunus and giant monsters. A lot of his stuff, not all, but a lot of his stuff is based on sort of like witchcraft and Wicca. And there's a lovely photograph of him. Okay, very nice photo. He had such a lovely face for somebody who comes up with all these like really, really hectic books. He has quite a nice face, and he comes across as a really nice guy. I actually saw a few interviews with him on YouTube. So if you're into James Herbert, go look at the interviews. He just comes across as such a cool guy. Okay, so that's Sepulchre. Okay, then some newbie ones again. This is Creed. Love that artwork. Okay, this is about. It's not really what you think. The Creed is actually the guy's name, the main protagonist here, and he is a photographer, and he can't really believe, wow, he's seeing all these things in his photographs, okay? And he thinks it's pranks, but it's not. It's actual demonic stuff. We're getting there, guys. I told you it's going to be a long video today. Okay, then I've got Portent. This is a pretty cool book. Again, love the cover. Okay, these are all by Pan, by the way. These are all Pan covers. Re-released books, re-released covers. The original covers didn't look like this. This is about. I can't really tell you about this because it's going to spoil it. Let's just say that there's an outbreak of violence all over the world. Okay, and basically this guy has to. James Rivers, he has to go and he's got to kind of find out what it's all about. Because all over the world, all this like violence is broken out, and normal people like the housewives are killing their husbands, and young girls are killing their mothers and shit like that. So it's worth a read. It's not one of his best, but it's definitely worth reading. Okay. All right. Then I've got a very strange one of his called 48. This book has kind of slipped through the cracks. Everybody knows about it, but I don't think many people have read it. Okay, it's basically, it's a reimagining of the ending of the Second World War in 1945. They reimagine it that Hitler did not die. He in his book, Hitler doesn't die. But what happens is Hitler releases this thing called the Blood Death. Okay, and it turns everyone into kind of vampires except this one guy. He's immune. And he lives like this for 3 years, trying to avoid living underground and that. And then the people find out about him and they want a cure because he's the only one who's immune to this. I think his name is. It doesn't tell you I can't remember what his name was. Anyway, he is chased by these kind of like vampiric people in 1948. Okay, so 3 years after the war ended. Very good book. I was very surprised. I'd heard about this, but I'd never ever read it. And it's one of those weird little books that a lot of people don't quite know where it fits in with James Herbert. Very good. I loved it. Okay, let me just make a little bit more space here. Guys, I'm running out of space. Okay, then I've got Once. So cool. Okay, this is quite an interesting book because it's a book about all your, the childhood nursery rhymes and not nursery rhymes, like fables, like Beauty and the Beast and that sort of thing. It says here, remember the fairy stories you were told when you were a child. Tales of tiny magical winged beasts and elves, witches, wicked witches, goblins, demons. What if you actually one day found out they were all real? Okay, and I can't tell you any more about the book. That is what this book's all about. That's scary stuff, okay? Because trust me, fairies, you don't want to fuck with fairies, okay? Did I say just don't fuck with furries, or did I say fairies? Anyway, whatever. Okay, so this this is a really cool book. All right. Okay, 2 more James Herbert. Nobody True. This was interesting. This is the only James Herbert hardcover I've got. I don't like hardcovers, guys. I like to collect paperbacks. But this is really cool. It is it's another one that I can't really tell you about. It's about a guy who dies, okay? But does he really die? Does he, because he comes back and then he says that he wasn't actually there when he died. So where was he? What happened to him? It's one of his more complicated novels. It's not like it kind of jumps around a lot, but it's really good. It's worth getting hold of. I paid 20 South African rand for this, which is like $2 or $1 even, maybe $2. Okay, really good book. And then the last book that I've got is a book called The Secret of Crickley Hall. This has been made into a mini-series, and that's why the cover is so shite. Okay, it's quite a big book, but it's basically about a haunted house. Okay, there's something not quite around this place. It's constantly cold, blah blah blah. So it's a real haunted house story. Do not like that. It says there it's a BBC adaptation. If you can see that, BBC adaptation. Really, it's a game. It's by Pan, but this is a terrible cover. Worth reading. Apparently, it's really good. It's not one of his most famous books. Not many people know about it, but it's a really, really good book. Now, I'm only waiting for one more book, and then my entire James Herbert series is complete. And the book is called The Jonah, and that is what's coming from overseas, from Amazon. Okay, now I want to show you some books. Now, what I've done is there's certain authors that I have a great respect for, okay? Certain authors that I really, really enjoy. But I don't want all their books because they are so, they're not books that would interest me. They are books that I probably would read once and then give away. And I don't like buying stuff like that. I love buying books that I will keep and that I will reread and that are pertinent to me, and I love seeing them in my collection, knowing that I can dip into that and dip into that, and this one will bring back memories of when I was 16 and I read that for the first time, blah blah. But these are three authors that I've got a couple of their books, literally a couple, and the first author is a guy called William Peter Blatty. Does that sound familiar? He wrote The Exorcist. Okay, this is the completely uncut 40th anniversary version of The Exorcist. Okay, it's got scenes in here that stuff in here that was edited out of the first publication. This is William Peter Blatty also wrote the screenplay to the movie, but he really changed a lot. So the book is very different to quite different to the movie. So I've got this, and then I've got Legion, which they say here is the sequel to The Exorcist, but it's actually not. It's the prequel. Okay, it's the prequel to The Exorcist. So this would go here. All right, so you would read Legion first and then The Exorcist. Okay, so those are the only two books from William Peter Blatty that I actually want. I don't want anything else. Not a horror author, but a disturbing author is a person called Virginia Andrews, V.C. Andrews. She wrote a very famous book that is called Flowers in the Attic. There's a whole, I think there are 5 books. There are more than 5 books, but after writing the 5th book, she died. So only the first 5 books in the series, okay, are written by her. And then the other books after that are written by somebody else who continued to write as Virginia Andrews, but it's not actually her. And the most famous book is called Flowers in the Attic. And this is a wonderful HarperCollins book. You can see that the picture is beautiful. This is a very, very difficult book to read. It is about a family, and it is about incest and rape, and some really hardcore shit goes down in this book. If you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. Okay, it is definitely worth getting. All right, because it's not horror like in Ghosts and Demons and stuff, but it's horrific. So that's the first one. I did not want to get the others because they follow a very strange pattern of revenge and that sort of thing. And I'm here for the horror. I'm not really here for murder mystery stuff. If I want murder mystery, I'll go to my Agatha Christie collection. Strangely enough, one of the books that was written by Virginia Andrews, an original one, is this one. It's still part of Flowers in the Attic, but it's called Garden of Shadows, and it's actually the prequel to this one. But it came out long after this one. And it's about the adults or the parents in this book and how the parents here became the monsters they did. So this is a very interesting book, and I haven't read it. So I've read this about 4 times, but I haven't read this one, so I'm really, really looking forward to it. So those are the 2 Virginia Andrews books I've got. Okay. Flowers in the Attic and Garden of Shadows. Don't you love that cover? Black rose. It's so cool. Okay. Then, of course, everyone's heard of Clive Barker. If you haven't heard of Clive Barker, he wrote a whole lot of short stories called The Books of Blood. They were all collected. They were different books, and they were all collected into compendiums. He wrote also a very famous book called Weave World, which I've read. It's a chunky book about this big. Like, seriously, the book is probably like that big. Okay? Weave World is like that. It's more fantasy than anything else, so I kind of gave it away to my brother, in fact. So Clive Barker, there was a movie just recently, a remake of Books of Blood, a whole lot of short stories that eventually come together. Now, the only books I enjoy that I want of Clive Barker are the Books of Blood books. So volumes 1 to 3, volumes 4 to 6. And in these books is, yes, Pinhead appears, but he's not really Pinhead yet. He's something different. So yeah, we have that story. We have a lot of very interesting short stories. And this is the only Clive Barker books. These are the only Clive Barker books I want. So there's those 2. Okay. Now, what I often do is, what I do a lot is I will go and I will buy loads and loads of secondhand used horror books. Then what I do is I come home and I put them on the shelf vertically. So I'll put them on the shelf like that. Or horizontally, so horizontally. Put them on the shelf. Okay. And then what I do is every now and again I'll grab one and I'll read it. And if I find it really, really intriguing, and if I find that I will actually reread it, it goes into my collection of non-canonical books. Okay. Whether it's part of a like a Peter Straub who's written many different books, even if I don't like his other books, I might keep one of these. So what I've done is all of these books I've read, okay, these ones that I'm going to show you now, I've read all of them and I've kept them. I've kept them because I know I'm going to reread them, okay? They're such good books, all right? So I'm going to quickly show you. This is by John Saul, very famous author. Okay, he's got a whole lot of books, but I don't really like his books that much, except for this one. This one's really, really, really good, and it's about these people who it's about 3 young guys. They're probably like 16, 14, 15, like 15, 16 years old. They go away to Pinecrest, which is a really cool place to go on vacation with their parents in summer vacation. And there is this, there's a whole lot of stuff. There's this big house. They've got to go investigate the house, and there's like murders that happen and weird shit goes on, and it's all related to the house. And they go and solve the mystery of the house. Okay, so that's John Saul's The Dark of the Night. Really good, one of his really good books. Then I have got a Graham Masterton book called Mirror. Now everybody knows about this book. I love that cover. I think people, once they've read this, they toss it out, because when I went to my secondhand store, there were like literally 3 of this exact copy, like 3 of these. So of course I bought the least damaged one, and this is very cool. It's been made into a movie, but I can't remember when. It was a long time ago, and it's basically about. It sounds really weird. There's this character called Buffles, who's a young child star in the 1930s, and he dies, and this guy buys the mirror that was hanging over Buffles' fireplace when his mother chopped him up. His mother cut him up into pieces with an axe, and it's all about how Buffles' his soul is trapped in the mirror, and this guy ends up with the mirror, and it's like some serious shit goes down. It's a fantastic book. Graham Masterton, it's very hit or miss with him. I only have this one of his. If I see another one of his books, I will buy it, but this is my favorite and probably his most well-known book. Get it, don't get it, whatever. Jericho Falls, Stephen Hyde. Stephen Hyde generally writes, he's not a horror writer. Again, he's got that whole splashy thing like Dean Koontz. This book I read many, many years ago, and then I reread it in like the 90s, and then now I've kind of reread it again, and it's a fantastic book called Jericho Falls. Love the cover. And it's not a horror story. It's about a chemical spill, okay, and what happens to the small town where this chemical spills. It's a really, really good read, okay? That's all I'm saying about it. Really good read. Christopher Hyde's other stuff is nah. All right, this is a really cool story, a cool book. Now, how cool is that cover? This is divine. It's tiny. You can read this in an afternoon. I'll tell you when this was printed. This was printed, it's a very old book. It is by Star Publishers, which I don't think they... This was published in 1977. Okay, this was published in 1977. It's by W. Harris, and it says, "Their lust let a killer loose in Britain. Rabies." Now, the book is not called Rabies, the book is called Saliva. And this is not really a horror book. It's about a strain of rabies that gets passed down from person to person. But the reason the rabies is so like deadly, if you want, is because this all happens within the confines of Parliament. And you'll see juicy information about who's having affairs with who, and this commissioner's wife is having an affair with that parliamentarian, and they all tend to pass this rabies on to each other. And it's such a cool book. If there's one book I can recommend that everybody read in the horror sort of canon, it's this book. It's so good. It's cheesefest, splatterpunk, fucking splatter gore, whatever. It's called Saliva. Okay. Then I have a very famous one called The Omen. It was written by David Seltzer. He also wrote the screenplay, and this basically, the screenplay follows this book almost chapter by chapter, word for word. So I'm not going to say too much about that. The other books and the other movies, he wanted nothing to do with them, so he never wrote anything else. Okay, we might have written the third one, I'm not sure. This is a very cool book. I don't like the cover. I think it looks like a R.L. Stine book, you know, Goosebumps. It's about this cave, and there's this creature in this cave, or this force in this cave, and it's about this young boy who has this dream about this force, and basically he is the key to destroying the force. Reads a little bit like YA, you know, young adult fiction, but it's got some pretty gnarly scenes in it, so definitely worth keeping. I will reread it. This is a really cool story, Shadow Eyes. It's actually about American Indian legend, and it's about set in a town where murders start happening, and not only murders, but people start killing themselves, suicides start happening, and again, they have to prove what it is. They've got to see what it is, but it's all linked to American Indian, Native Indian lore and myth, which I found really interesting. And it's called Shadow Eyes, and I love that cover. Okay, this is one, if you can get it, I don't even know if it's still in print, but it's worth a read, especially if you live in America and you know the myths and tales of sort of, you know, the Native American culture and that sort of thing. Really definitely get that. Then I have an amazing, oh my God, this book is like amazing. I read this book in 2 days. I literally could not put it down. And it's a book by Scott Smith. His very famous book was called A Simple Plan. Very good book, not a horror book. It's very clever. But this one is called The Ruins. And I'm sure most of you have seen the movie. Okay? It's about these people who go on a backpack trek to see the Mayan ruins, and they are super, super disrespectful of the people, and they're super disrespectful of the culture, and they end up getting trapped on top of this Mayan ruin, and there's all kinds of shit that goes down. There's this, I'm not going to tell you too much about it, but if you look very carefully at the cover, you can kind of sort of see what it might be about. Okay, gory as fuck, and just, I literally could not put this book down. I read it in 2 days. I've also seen the movie, and this is virtually the same as the movie. Okay, then we have The Demon Circle, the most disgusting book I've ever read. It is so splatter, you can't believe it. And in fact, my fiance told me to read this book. He is not into this kind of reading. He normally reads stuff about sort of like Afghanistan and, you know, how the woman escaped from Afghanistan and woman's life and everything, that sort of thing. And he read this and he was like, you're going to have to read this. It's so good. Again, it's about cults, a cultish thing, and it's about this guy whose wife and daughter were killed. It's just, it's crazy. It's a crazy book. So it's called The Demon Circle. It's by Dan Schmidt. Dan Schmidt. I don't know what else he's written. I've never ever heard of him, but this is like, wow, I'll definitely reread it. Then I have got Saurian from William Scholl. Okay, he also wrote a very nice book called Bride of Satan, which was great fun. Another one of these cheesy things. Okay, and this is basically about a killer fish. Okay, it says it rose from the depths of time, larger than life, stronger than death. Saurian. Okay. Saurian, give it a go. It's one of those trashy throwaway things that I know I'm going to reread because I just have this problem with creatures from the deep. Okay. Then I have a very famous book called Ghost Story by Peter Straub. It's the only book by Peter Straub except for Coco that I really liked. Coco is not a horror story. It is a book that's this big though. This is really cool. Horror story. It is not so much in your face horror. It is a ghost story, and there's it's a ghost story. There's a really good movie that was made with very famous actors, and if you can't get yourself to plow through this, then go and get the movie. It's really worth. It's old, but it's worth watching. It's got such a twist. It's got a lovely twist to it. Okay, and the last but not least, I've got a Richard Matheson book called I Am Legend. I won't even go there. It's the Will Smith, the remake with Will Smith. Okay, it was made in the first film adaptation was with Vincent Price called Last Man on Earth. Then there was one called The Omega Man, and then they had Legend, which was or I Am Legend. It was with Will Smith. Short little book. It's a vampire book. It's a post-apocalyptic vampire book. Get it, read it. Apparently, it's really good, and apparently they study this in some schools. Okay, in English class. Okay, so those are the books that I've read that I will keep, that I'm definitely going to keep. They are part of my collection. They are part of my non-canonical collection, I call it that. And guys, I told you it's going to be a long one. I'm going to quickly show you the books that I still have to read. And if you've read any of these books, any of these ones, leave me a comment down below. Don't tell me that, yes, I read Clive Barker's books and they're fantastic. We know that. That's why I've got them. But if you've read any of these books, let me know. The first one is by Claire McNally. It's called Come Down Into the Darkness, and I had to buy it just because of the cover. Fantastic. These books are old, by the way. Awesome cover, and I haven't read this. It's about a young girl, and there's a madman in the woods, and children seem to be missing, and I just love that. Then I have Night Vision. It's by Frank King. I'm not too sure if I like that or hate it. It's 5 people know what their dreams signify, and they're the lucky ones. It's about night vision, people seeing shit in their dreams and it comes true. So that's going to be a cool one. Then I've got Black Horizon by Robert Masello. I just love the cover. I have no idea what this is about. The gates between life and death have been opened. All right, so that's going to be interesting. But I actually bought it because of the cover. I just love that cover. Then I've got a book written by 2 people, John Skipp and Craig Spector. It's called The Light at the End. This was actually recommended to me by a guy called Serial at Midnight. Well, recommended to me, but I saw this on his channel, his YouTube channel. He's called Serial at Midnight. And he raved about this book, and I thought, okay, I saw this, and it was so cheap. It was like, again, it was super cheap. So I'm going to read it. I don't know what it's about. The back is too long to read, so I'm going to give it a whirl. I like the cover. It's kind of glitzy, you know. Okay, then I've got 2 Joe Donnelly books. Now, I read the first Joe Donnelly. It was called Bane, and I wasn't that interested. It went very much into the background of children and why they had to kill this thing. It reminded me too much of Stephen King's It, but it was like the poor man's It. But I've got 2 others here of his. One is called Shrike. Okay, love the covers. They are all by Arrow. Yeah, Arrow Publishers, which is why they've got similar covers. This one, it's about a superhuman something or other that comes out and slaughters people. I have to say I haven't read it there. And then this one is called Still Life. You can see again, very similar artwork. Like the artwork, I don't have a problem with it. And this one is about, again, it's a village that's kind of haunted and all kind of shit goes down. Okay, so I'm kind of looking forward to reading those. The first one that I read, Bane, wasn't so fantastic, but I might keep it. I'm not sure. Then I've got Phil Rickman. Phil Rickman's a very well-known author. He's written a lot of stuff, but I've read 1 or 2 of his other books, and I was like, this is really not something I'd read again. Not bad, but just not something I'd read again. But I loved the cover of this. Look here. Creepy. Love the cover. It's kind of like, oh God, it's about a guy's on the radio, and I think this place is called Crib, blah, 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 church, the small country town, Crib, again, small country town that's haunted. Looking forward to that one. And then another full recommend that I've got is December. This one I got I got halfway through this and then I had to put it down because I actually wanted to start Ash. So again, 1980, Blood Will Run Again, the Abbey's Townhouse. He loves to write about like haunted, demonic, I don't know, fucking towns and stuff and buildings and things. So I'm looking forward to that one as well. This is printed by Berkeley, so you can see that the cover is completely different. Right, if you're still with me and you haven't passed out, thank you so much for watching this. This has been really a vanity video because I've wanted to do this more for myself than for anybody else. So if you have enjoyed this, thank you so much. I'm not putting breakdowns down below. This is one of those things that if you've sat with me, you've sat with me. I hope you've probably had like 2 bottles of wine already. And yeah, what can I say? Guys, thank you so much for being with me. And maybe in 2 years' time, I'll do a follow-up. Love you all so much. You know who I am. I'm Matt from Tubby Tarot, and this has been a very special edition of Book Chat. Bye.